Hi, I'm Maxine and I create easy to follow step-by-step tutorials on how to draw. Today I want to talk to you about eyes. Today I want to show you how to draw eyes in a really simple way without using tracing paper or a grid method. If you like my tutorial, then at any point in the video you can click on that red button in the corner to subscribe to my channel. Now, as we know, eyeballs are a sphere, a bit like this apple. Now this is how I'm going to show you. I don't have a tennis ball, so I made an apple into an eyeball. I think it's actually quite effective because the pupil disappears a bit like it would in normal life as well. Now do bear in mind that everybody's eyes are different, their eyelids are different, their irises are different, and sometimes even pupils are different as well. With this technique, I'm hoping to accommodate all shapes and sizes of different eyeballs. Now, as you can see, I put a pupil right in the middle there, and I've got the iris just there as well. This is about the right size of an iris for the eyeball itself. Now watch as this circle changes shape when I move it out to the side. It's not a circle anymore, is it? It's more like an oval, and the pupil in the middle is exactly the same. And the same if I point it upwards, and to the side, and downwards. So remember, when you're drawing your eyeball, you need to take this into account. You don't want to be drawing an exact circle regardless of the direction. I hope that makes sense. Let's crack on with the drawing. Let's go.
Now, most people would probably start off with the eyelids so then they get the shape of the eye straight away. I'm going to teach you differently. So your first step is to make the sphere of the full eyeball as if it wasn't in a socket or had eyelids. Then, once you've done that circle, then you put in your iris circle and then your pupil in the middle. I'm just going to do this nice and easy for you today, so it's going to be looking straight at you, and the eyelids relatively simple as well. Once you've got those three circles in, then you can start building up your eyelids around it. Don't forget they're going over a spherical object, so they're going to need to go around the eye as well. I am doing the first layer with a 3H, so it's nice and light, and I can go over with a darker pencil and remove the original lines that don't sit where I want them. Now I've got the basics down, I'm going to switch my pencils to a 3B and start putting in the outlines where I want them. Now, eyes don't have outlines, so what I mean by outlines is putting in the guides as to where you're going to be shading. They don't have to be hard lines, just nice light lines where you know you can shade off of them. This is a really simple sketch just to show you the basics of how I would draw an eye, but I would go back in and put in a lot more detail in later on, or I may start off like this and then go straight into the detail after that first basic layer with the lighter pencil. Moving on, we come to eyelashes. Eyelashes are really tricky for a lot of people because when we think of eyelashes, we think of them coming straight off of our eyes and going straight up, but they don't, they curve, and it's very difficult for us to translate that into a drawing. But you need to train your brain to see the eyelashes rather than imagine where they should be going. There is a pivot point on the eyelid where the eyelashes then start to change direction. That can be in a different place depending on which direction your eye is looking as well. So it just adds more complications, doesn't it? Look at people's eyes in all different directions and take note of where those eyelashes are and what direction they're going in, and what part of those eyelashes can't you see? Because a lot of the time we don't see that part underneath where it's actually joined to our skin, because it curves down and then up. So there's actually some parts that we don't see. Can you see now how this is taking shape but still has that outer circle? Well, this is where your eyelid comes in. If you had, say, a droopy eyelid, then obviously that line is going to be in a slightly different place. Or similarly, if you didn't have that crease in your eyelid at all, then obviously you're going to need to rub that section out and change the shading accordingly. So I'm starting to put a little bit of the shading in where it would be naturally if the light was kind of coming towards the eye. You have shade coming down from under the eyelashes, where the eyelashes shade from the light. And again, because it's a sphere, you will need to shade around the sides where that sphere disappears into the eyelids. Essentially, you are shading the white sections of the eyes, and the iris for that matter, like you would a ball. So a little bit of sketching into the iris. I can do a separate video on the details in the iris, because actually that is quite complex, and unless you're doing super close up or you're doing really detailed work, you're not really going to need to take that on board right at this moment. All you need to know now is that the outer section of the iris, on the whole, tends to have a darker ring around it, and the inner section of the iris also is usually darker and tends to blend into the pupil a little as well. Now I'm done with my 3B pencil, I'm going to use my mechanical just to get a little bit more depth into the eye. I can press a little bit harder with the mechanical pencil, even though it's actually a 2B, which is slightly lighter than the 3B. Because of the pressure I can use, and because it's such a small lead, then it tends to make the pencil look darker. How am I doing so far? Is this seeming fairly easy? Let me know in the comments below if you are managing to follow this exercise and it's successful, because it really helps me when I'm making new videos to understand what other people are thinking of them and whether they work, really. I want them to work. I want you to get better. I want you to be able to draw. I feel like I might be faffing a little bit with these eyelashes, but at least you can see actually a mechanical pencil is a lot easier to use when it comes to eyelashes because it's that much thinner. This one is a 0.3 lead, so it's a lot easier to get those details in. And again, with this waterline underneath the eye, it needs sharpening up a little, but you don't want a really hard line, so the mechanical pencil is really good for that. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but Maxine, you've just put a hard line all the way underneath the eyeball. Well, yes, I have, but I can go in at a later date and I can blend that out a little bit. It's not too hard, it's not a really solid dark line. Also, I just wanted to do a basic sketch today so that you can see the very basics of how an eyeball sits inside an eyelid. I'm not doing a super realistic eyeball right now, but I can do that in another one. So I've nearly finished faffing around. I'm just dragging in some of the edges on the iris so that then it makes it less of a line around the iris like I was talking about earlier. They don't really have a hard line around them. Even when you look at somebody's eye, they are quite blended into the whites of the eye. So I'm pretty much done here. I'm now going to move on to doing eyes in a couple of different directions, just to show you how the eyelids change when the eyeball is facing a different way. So I'm going to do two different ones that are two different directions. Again, starting off with the main circle in a lighter pencil, and then I'm going to do the iris and pupil inside as well. Once you've got those down, then you can start looking at where the eyelids are going. I'm putting in the well. Now where the well stops and changes direction a little is where you hit that circle. Once you've hit the circle, obviously you need to go round as if it's a ball that you're drawing on. Then once we've got those main basic bits down, we can start to shade using the darker pencil. Now watch where the eyelid sits here. Obviously if they're looking up, then that top eyelid almost disappears inside your eye socket. You will notice that yourself if you look at somebody and ask them to look up towards the ceiling. You'll notice that their eyelid disappears, but their bottom eyelid will then stick out because the eyeball will then push that bottom eyelid out a little bit more. So that's where you need to then adjust your shading accordingly. Now where the eyeball white meets the pink part of your eye is where you need to follow your original large circle and use that to shade from. If you don't use your original circle for that section, then you're going to end up making your eye not look spherical. Shade in the iris nice and quick again so you can get the gist of it. And then remember that when you're looking up, you can see that little shelf on the lower eyelid and also probably on the upper eyelid as well. Those areas are possibly the most important part to make sure that you put into your drawings of eyes, because they make it that much more realistic. If you don't include those little shelves, then your eyes just won't look 3D enough. Now moving on to the eyelashes, remember there is that pivot point. So at the moment, if you can imagine you've got some fake eyelashes stuck onto a cue ball that is round, you're going to have a point where those eyelashes change direction. So on this eyeball, as you can see, I have put the pivot point where the sphere is at its widest point. And then obviously the same goes for the lower lashes as well. I don't usually use a blending stump, but actually they work really well on eyeballs. So I've got that out again and making that eyeball look really spherical. Obviously you can go back over, once you've used the blending stump, that can take some of the graphite off of your drawing, so you can go back in again and then start using your pencil to darken certain areas up if they have lightened up too much. Now the reason I don't use blending stumps in my realistic drawings is because I don't feel like I've got quite enough control over the shading with the blending stump as opposed to my pencil, where I can put pressure on and take pressure off, or I can change which pencil graphite I use. I'm going to move on to the next one, but this time I'm going to refer back to my apple to help to see the shape of the iris. And as you can see, it's a nice oval shape, and so is the pupil as well. I'll speed up the rest of this drawing and then show you all the other ones that I've done at the end. Just a quick tip, again, like the other eye where it's facing upwards. This one is facing down and the bottom eyelid is obviously tucked right into that eye socket, just like the top one was tucked into the eye socket when it was looking up. So obviously you need to make that bottom eyelid kind of disappear as well in a little fold. I hope that makes sense. Here are some of the other ones I've been working on, looking in all sorts of directions. And I had a little experiment with the last one with some coloured pencils.
I hope you enjoyed my tutorial on eyeballs today. Let me know what you would like to see next, whether it be noses, lips, ears, or hair. Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you and whether you liked my tutorial and it's been helpful. Thank you. See you soon. Bye.